Hello everyone, Flazipper here. Today we're going to go on an updated tour of my game room. Now I've been a retro gamer and collector for quite a while at this point, but around 2014 is when I really got back into it, and I've slowly built up the game room over this span of time. I'm mostly focused on the games and systems that I grew up with, so this is basically the NES through the Dreamcast era. I went strictly PC gaming after that, so I don't have much nostalgia for consoles after the Dreamcast. Now, this era of gaming was also just a magical time to grow up. You felt like you were growing up as games did, from the 8-bit NES to the 16-bit to the mind-blowing at the time 3D graphics introduced in the PS1 era. It was just every console generation felt like this magical leap forward. Now, I did a game room tour video about a year and a half ago when I started the channel. The channel's been just an absolute great way to interact with the hobby, and gives me an excuse to play all these old games, dust them off the shelf and get going. Hopefully I've got better production and audio quality this time, even though admittedly not much has changed in the room itself. Have added some games, and hopefully the video turns out better production wise. But I want to thank everyone for watching, and let's get right into it. Alright, so this is an extra bedroom. It was kind of a catch-all room. It was bright red. But, around 2014, I slowly turned this into my PC/gaming room, painted the walls white. I did want it like a dark dungeon kind of gaming room. This has 3 windows, lets in a lot of light, which is great because I spend most of my time when I'm at home in the game room, and I wanted a bright, happy, positive vibe kind of room. One of the first things I did buy was this big desk from IKEA. I don't think they still offer it, but just look at all that counter space, all that desk space if you're working on projects, and it's really came in helpful for shooting videos and stuff like that. But yeah, this kind of splits the room off. It's kind of like the PC side of the room. I have my PC and HDMI consoles over there, and then over here we have a couch. This is also an IKEA, just a small IKEA love seat. It fits the room well because it's not very big. Now, I did get a new couch cover because the cat did a number on the corner here. He's already going to town on it, but it's in much better shape than the previous one, so that's something I just picked up in the last month or two. Over here we have, this is also from IKEA. Most of the stuff I have in this room is from IKEA, so it's not super expensive. Now, I did get a lot of this like almost a decade ago, so they probably have at least newer versions of it. I put some legs on the bottom of it to give it some space for the power supplies and surge protectors. Now the TV setup, I do have a flat panel TV. I think it's a 46-inch TV, so not super big TV, but due to the close proximity of the couch, anything bigger would be a little too big, I think. I eventually do want to get a PVM or CRT, even though I'm not actively looking for one, but if I do stumble across one for a good deal, I'll probably eventually pick it up and try to work it in here somehow. Now, these boxes down here is where I keep all the extra controllers. I have some other knickknacks in there. I think I have old upscalers in there, like I think my Framemeister and stuff like that. But it's, it has it handy, keeps it out of sight. Lets you keep the room nice and tidy so you don't have them hooked up at all times. Up here we have artwork. These are from Data Discs. They did vinyl releases of these Sega games. That's either Revenge of Shinobi or Shadow Dancer, I'm not exactly sure. Streets of Rage and Shenmue. And these frames you can also find at IKEA. They're just 12 by 12. They're for putting basically vinyl records in, like the album artwork. But these were just artwork inserts inside the vinyl releases, and just very good quality, and I really love how they look here in the room. Now down here I do have an actual U-turn orbit record player. I don't play records that much in this room. Mostly do that in the living room, and that's where all my records are. But it's nice to have the option. Now I do have a 2.1 audio setup. I have Wharfdale speakers, one on each side. And my receiver's over here, and there's a subwoofer down there, kind of hidden. Console-wise here, all these consoles are on a shelving system that I got from CB2. I believe it's some kind of offshoot from Crate and Barrel. But I really love this shelving unit because I wanted something that actually let me display my consoles, but I could also have them hooked up and functional and ready to go at a moment's notice. It is kind of annoying to set up, you know, the initial setup, trying to get all these cables routed through these. I have cable hider things back behind there, but you know, you're really not going to mix these out or, you know, switch out your consoles. I would eventually like to add a PS2. So the Master System might have to go away, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Now, the consoles themselves, the Master System, my Master System actually doesn't work. I don't even have any wires ran or anything. Now, someone made a comment before that there is a common problem with these Master Systems, something about a power supply, a capacitor or something. And I'm eventually that's gonna be a project I'm gonna try. I think it'll be a fun project, but just a really cool looking console at the very least. I grew up with the NES, so I don't have much nostalgia for the Master System, but I mean, just look at it. My Nintendo 64 is RGB modded. I would like to get an Ultra HDMI mod. It gives a little bit better graphic options, I feel like, but we'll get to that at some point, I think. Sega 32X, Sega Genesis Model 2, and the Sega CD Model 2. Also have wireless adapters for controllers on that. And over here we have the Sega Dreamcast. Oh, and the this outputs RGB natively. You just have to get the correct cable, so no modding needed. The Sega Dreamcast, on the other hand, I had to get this little box called a Toro box. Now, I bought this years and years ago, so there's probably better options at this point, but it gets the job done. It lets you send the signal out to SCART RGB. NES, my NES is RGB modded. You do have to do a mod to output RGB on the NES. Super Nintendo, I'm not a huge Super Nintendo guy, but I do have one here. And it also outputs RGB natively. Just get the correct cable and hook it up. The Sony Playstation, the PS1, one of my favorite areas of gaming. I do have a Mem Card Pro, so that saves everything to a micro SD card, and I have a wireless adapter there for controllers. It also outputs RGB natively. Just get the correct cable, you're good to go. And the same with the Sega Saturn. Now, all these consoles are on their own surge protector, and all the video gets outputted over here into the G-SCART switcher. Now, the G-SCART switches automatically. If you power a console on, once it receives a signal, it will automatically switch and output to the upscaler. And the upscaler that I have right now is a RetroTink 5X. I had an OSSC. I recently got the RetroTink 5X. There's nothing wrong with the OSSC, but the RetroTink's, I think, are definitely a better product. And then the RetroTink outputs the signal to HDMI. And I have the HDMI going directly into my Elgato capture device, which then outputs it to the TV. So I can, at a moment's notice, power anything on, capture it, and it's a very nice setup, especially if you're making videos. All right, we'll move right into the games here. Sega Saturn. I love the Sega Saturn. I didn't have one. I had a PS1, but there's something about long box games. Saturn, the PS1 long box, Sega CD. I just really have a soft spot for long box games, and especially games from this era. Starting here at the top, Albert Odyssey is my, I don't know if I should say rare, but it's the most valuable. It's working designs. It's an RPG. It doesn't have great reviews. I haven't heard great things about it, and RPGs just take so long to get through. I admittedly haven't played it yet, but maybe one day, maybe when I'm retired, I'll have time. Alien Trilogy, I had this game. It was the second game I ever bought on the PlayStation, but I did a video on the PlayStation version a few months ago, and that gave me the urge to buy the Saturn version. Moving on, Area 51. If you ever see the blank, no artwork, that is a stall.
It's a platformer. It's a beautiful looking platformer on the Saturn. It's one of those, I'm not sure I love the gameplay of it, but glad to have it at the very least. Die Hard Arcade. This is another recent pickup. After I did a video on Fighting Force, I got kind of in the mood for some 32-bit beat 'em up action, and I think it's probably better than Fighting Force, if I had to be honest. And I'll eventually, hopefully there'll be a video on that one fairly soon. Doom, a pretty awful version of Doom for the Sega Saturn. Some fighting games, Legend of Oasis. I've been meaning to play that forever. Loaded, it's kind of the same deal. I did a video on Loaded, the PS1 version, and I knew I had to grab the Saturn version. Next row, see if we can get rid of the glare here. Some sports titles, Resident Evil, Sega Rally. Love Sega Rally, one of my favorite racing games. Some of the Virtua games, and that is my Saturn collection. It is one of the consoles I'm actively collecting for. I would say after the PS1, I'm always on the lookout for Sega Saturn games, but they are very expensive, and I get what I can when I can. All right, so we'll move over. Let's do a pan here to the Sega CD and the Genesis as well. Now this shelving system I got at the Container Store. I don't love how it looks necessarily. It's not as, I think these would more confined systems look better, but for the system for the layout I have here, the problem here in this room is there's these two closets right next to each other. So I needed to get something that fit right in here. These are exactly, I think, 2 foot wide, or is that 2 or 3 feet? I don't even know. But they fit perfect in between there, so I had to utilize the space the best I could. And these shelves are adjustable, which is something you definitely need for something as, the size of these long box games, and even the Genesis games. But I do have a complete US Sega CD set. It is the only complete set that I have, and I completed it 2000, I guess it was 6 or 7 years ago at this point, which seems wild, but much like everything during the pandemic, prices really skyrocketed. So I'm glad I have them at this point. Now, I didn't have a Sega CD growing up. I had a Genesis. My cousin had a Sega CD, so I do have nostalgia for it. There's just something about it that, this was the first console I really started collecting for. If you think of, I'm a game collector, it was Sega CD. Back then the prices, were definitely cheaper and it was more obtainable. We'll look at some of the games here. Well, we'll look at all of them because this is a complete set. Android Assault. There's some great games on Sega CD, but there's also a lot of not so great games, I'll be honest. The glare is going to be pretty bad here. Fatal Fury Special. KO Flying Squadron. Here is the absolute holy grail of the system. Most valuable game. It's a cute 'em up. It must be pretty rare because I don't know. The price is skyrocketed to over $2,000. It's definitely not worth it, if I had to be honest about that. Lunar 1 and 2. Mega Race. Now, Mega Race I have nostalgia for simply because my very first computer was some crappy Packard Bell 486, and it came with a copy of Mega Race. I remember it ran at like 3 frames per second, and it runs only moderately better on the Sega CD. Mickey Mania is a pretty good game. Panic. Now, I always bring up Panic, even though I don't really have any urge to go play Panic again, but it's such an interesting and weird game. You see it right from the start with the Sega, the Sega intro jingle. I'll actually throw this in. I'll throw it in real quick so you can hear it. Popful Mail, Working Designs. It's a good action RPG. And that's one I picked up in the 90s. And thankfully I've held on to it because it's another really expensive game. Snatcher is the most iconic Sega CD game. Probably the best. Hideo Kojima. I think it's the only US release of Snatcher in the US is the Sega CD version. Just if you're collecting for the Sega CD, it's a must-have. You've got to get Snatcher. Although its price has shot up to around $1,000 too, I think, which is insane. Sonic CD. A lot of people really love Sonic CD. It's okay. The Terminator. I really like the Terminator. And that's it for the jewel case long boxes. Down here is the early release Sega CD games in a cardboard box. Thankfully, most of mine are in pretty good condition. Fighting Force CD is one of the best beat 'em ups out there. Love Fighting Force CD. It's very hard. Make my video. The infamous Night Trap. Sewer Shark. One of the pack-in games. And the Sega CD 32X set. As you see, not many. I mean, to be honest, if you had a Sega CD and 32X in 1995, you were living life, I don't know whether to say well or bad, but you were doing something. Next up, we have Sega Genesis. Now, I had a Sega Genesis growing up, and this is the one console that I have a pretty curated collection for. Not a lot of trash in here. I am a set collector I consider myself a set collector. My brain just works, so I need to get them all. But Sega Genesis, I haven't really went down that path. So every game here is either a pretty good game or a game that I have nostalgia for or some interest in some fathom. Forgotten Worlds, Ghouls and Ghosts, Golden Axe. Golden Axe is one of my more recent Sega Genesis pickups. Got a really good deal on that. The Shinobi games, Shining Force, Sonic 1 and 2. I mean, Sonic was kind of what kickstarted me wanting a Genesis. Streets of Rage 1 and 2, the best beat 'em ups of all time. Hands down. Toe Jam and Earl. Then I do have my Genesis games lined up on the shelf based on black grid box down. Then I got the red cases here. Castlevania Bloodlines, Contra Hardcore. Greatest Heavyweights is a pretty good boxing game. Shinobi 3, Sonic 3, Tecmo Super Bowl, played that game an awful lot. And then some random games down here. Rocket Knight Adventure, definitely the best out of that lot right there. All right, we'll move over here to the NES. Now, NES was the first console I had myself. Now, my parents had an Atari 2600, so I did play a 2600 before the NES, but the NES, you know, when Mario came out, my cousin had the one with Rob. And, you know, when you're 6 or 7 years old, it's like, oh gosh, I got to get this. These shelving systems are from IKEA. I think they still have them, I believe. IKEA Besta. It's hard to get shelving systems that are white and something like this that you can kind of, you know, aside from getting a custom shelving system put in here, this is about the best I could do. So I still got quite a bit of space for games, as you can see, but I definitely see an end in sight. But the NES, I've got pretty much everything I want for the NES. I'm not actively collecting for it anymore. I think there's probably, I don't remember the exact count, there's probably 175 to 200 NES games here. I do have a complete black box set. It's the only console I collect loose with just card only. I mean, that's mostly because I had a lot of these before I was, you know, I just had the cards. And I really don't, you know, growing up, I didn't know anyone that still had the boxes for their NES games, and I certainly didn't. We would get it, open it, and throw the box away. So I don't really have a lot of nostalgia for the actual boxes, but I have pretty much everything that I would want to get at this point. Yeah, I do have the Castlevania games. I love the Castlevania games. Commando. That's a game I remember wanting and getting back in the day. Donkey Kong Jr. Math. That is the most valuable cart I have, I believe. And I only got it because I was going for a complete black box set. Ghosts and Goblins. I had that as a kid. That's one of those games where I'm not sure. I was young enough to where I don't really remember how I got it. And it's like, did I ask for Ghosts and Goblins? Like, I didn't go to arcades. I never played it. So I don't know. Some games you're just like, how did I end up with that game? I mean, it's a good game. It's just really... Metroid's the same deal. I had Metroid as a kid. It's like, did I ask for Metroid? It seems like a weird game for like a 7-year-old kid to ask for. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Rambo. I did ask for Rambo, and I had Rambo. Unfortunately. Not a great NES game. Rygar, I had that as a kid. That's actually a great game. I'm definitely glad I have Rygar. The Super Mario games, they need no introduction. Tecmo Bowl, Tecmo Super Bowl, my favorite football games of all time. Just absolute classic games. And I have the 2 Zelda games down here. Down below this, we have some Amiibos. Back when the Amiibos first came out, I picked up a few, but thankfully I never got the Amiibo bug. Next up, we have my admittedly meager and pitiful Super Nintendo collection. But I had a Genesis growing up. I mean, I don't really have any interest in the Super Nintendo, I hate to say. I know most people, well, a lot of people consider it the greatest console of all time, but I have more than enough games to strive after, and besides trying to jump into Super Nintendo too. I have Pilot Wings, Darius Twin, and Cool Spot. And I mean, I might get more at some point, but I'm not actively looking for Super Nintendo games. Down below this, we have Nintendo 64. Now, I did have a Nintendo 64 back when it came out, and it gets a bad rap nowadays, but like any console, there's still some great games, and I have great memories from the Nintendo 64. Thankfully, I kept all the games I had as a kid, and I still have the boxes. So by this point, I was already in collector mode, I guess you could say. First here we have Blast Corps. I love that game. I played that game a lot. I don't think I ever beat it though. GoldenEye 007. I mean, I was playing like Doom on the PC at that point, but it was a game changer, at least for me. Mario Golf, my favorite golf game of all time. I put way too much time into Mario Golf. And I recently found out that it was actually developed by Camelot, which I believe also developed Hot Shots Golf for the PlayStation 1. So that says a lot right there about how good Hot Shot Golf is too. Mario Kart 64. Pilot Wings. I've always loved Pilot Wings. Star Fox 64. That's the bundle with the Rumble Pack. Super Mario 64. One of the best games of all time. I recently played through that with the 3D All-Star Collection on the Switch. It still holds up. Smash, Turok, Wave Race. So I haven't picked up a game in a while for the Nintendo 64, but there's still a lot of games I want to pick up. It's just kind of on the backlog, or on the back burner for now. I've been mostly focused on PS1 and Saturn. Moving over, we've got Sega Master System. I didn't have a Master System. I mean, I didn't know anyone who had a Master System. It was NES, but I did pick up in more recent times some of the classic games, Afterburner, Outrun, Phantasy Star. I did play through Phantasy Star. It's just really ahead of its time RPG. Rambo First Blood Part 2, that is a pretty recent pickup. I've always been a sucker for Rambo. Shinobi and Space Harrier. Just some of the iconic Sega franchises and IPs. Over here, some PS1 memory cards, some Game Gear games, some Vita games. Complete in box Streets of Rage 2 for Game Gear. Down below, we have those are like PS1 demo discs on the side. Sega Dreamcast. Now, this is the last console I bought back, in the 90s. I didn't even have a PS2. Like, it was Dreamcast and then PC gaming. So I never really got a lot of games for it. House of the Dead 2, Crazy Taxi. Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver is a fairly recent pickup. Picked that up about a year ago. I'll eventually be doing a video on that. NBA 2K. I played a lot of NFL 2K back then. Sega Rally 2, one of my favorite racing games of all time. Sonic Adventure. And here's some of the more Sega CD games. I've got some of the pack-in games. And the Sega Nomad. Cat's getting in my way here. And the Sega Vita. Or Sony Vita. PS Vita. I see it's got still got some shelf space here to move to add more. Next up we have the Sega 32X. Now this is close to being a complete set. It's missing 2 games, and of course they're 2 of the most expensive. Web of Fire, Spider-Man Web of Fire, which I haven't even looked at the prices recently, but I'm guessing it's in the $1,000 range, so I don't know if I'm ever going to complete this set. I'm also missing World Series Baseball with Deion Sanders. Some of them are sun-faded. Unfortunately, Blackthorn here's, I believe that's sun-fade. I don't think it came that much lighter than the other ones, but you never know. But I think it's the most valuable 32X game. Doom, as you can see, has the 32X logo backwards. That's annoying. Knuckles Chaotix, Calibri. Calibri is a very unique game. Space Harrier, Tempo, Virtua Fighter, Virtua Racing. I love Virtua Racing. Oh, and over here, this is actually the last pickup that I have. It's the Knights 3D control pad bundle. It's here for now. I would like to find a better spot for it, but with current setup, it's just kind of relegated to being down here by itself. It's the first time I actually used a 3D pad, and I was surprised at how much it felt like the Dreamcast controller, which isn't necessarily a great thing, but yeah. And next up we have the PS1. Now the PS1 I'm really in a PS1 mood lately. The last couple years, I've exponentially grown the PS1 collection. I would love to get a full set. Will I ever get one? I don't know, but I'm slowly working on it. It's the first thing I look for at a game store. I go straight to the PS1 section. Unfortunately, as you see here, the next long box I get, I'm going to have to completely redo the shelves. So that's kind of hindered me getting more long box games, at least for now. But that'll be something I'll be doing pretty soon. The PS1 came out when I was like 15 years old. And although I had a Genesis and Nintendo and played games before that, this was when I really got it, would consider myself a gamer. I got gaming magazines, loved Next Generation magazine, EGM, PlayStation, PSM. I remember getting the first issue of PSM, and I actually wrote like an email. I think I had email by that point, and I was in the magazine like as a comment, which is really nerdy. We'll look at the games here. Air Combat did a video on that. Alien Trilogy also did a video recently. The second PS1 game I ever bought. I'm glad I finally dug into it because it's a pretty good game, but back in the day, I don't know why, it just never resonated with me. Destruction Derby, the classic. In the Hunt. Jumping Flash. Loaded. Loaded has a special place for me, at least now. It's like the first game I did I consider it like my first video on the channel, and I was really happy with how that turned out, and it really gave me the motivation to keep going and really work on doing YouTube videos. Starblade Alpha. Now, Starblade Alpha is one of the most expensive PS1 games. It's just a really rare game. Glad I already have it. I think it's close to $400 or $500 at this point. Twisted Metal, Warhawk. A couple more games I've already done videos for. So that's my long box set. I've got about half. I think there's around 98 or 100. And I have, I don't know, that's close to 50, I think. So still got a ways to go on completing the long box set, but that's one of my goals at the very least. Now the jewel case games. Ace Combat, Adventures of Lomax, Alien Resurrection. This one recently shot up due to Modern Vintage Gamers video, but I haven't played through that one. That one's definitely on my list. I will definitely have a video of Alien Resurrection at some point. I got to get the PlayStation mouse first because it supports the PlayStation mouse, and I want to try playing it through with that. Alundra 2, Apocalypse. That game really surprised me. I did a video on that I do have all the Armored Core games. Army Men, Azure Dreams, I need to play through that one as well. Batman the arcade game, that's another really expensive PS1 game. Beyond the Beyond. Next row here. Bomberman Fantasy Race, also pretty expensive. Breath of Fire 3 and 4, Brave Fencer Musashi, and Bushido Blade 1 and 2. Those are fun, unique fighting games. Down here we have Bust a Move, Bust a Groove, Colony Wars. Oh, let me get the video centered here. Dino Crisis. Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy VII was the first JRPG I ever played. I really love that game. Intelligent Cube, Jet Moto, Metal Gear Solid. I need to replay through Metal Gear Solid. I haven't played through it since it came out. Resident Evil 2. It's classic games for the console. Tecmo Super Bowl, not a great version of Tecmo Super Bowl. I was actually excited to play that. And then it's definitely not as good as the NES or Genesis versions. Tomb Raider, another iconic game. Twisted Metal. Vandal Hearts, great strategy RPG. Wild Arms. X-Files. Xenogears. Now over here I have 3 greatest hits. I'm not really interested in greatest hits. Just kind of picked these up over the years. Then I do have 2. I have the Art the Lad collection and an Army Men collector's edition. PS3 controller and a wireless Sega Saturn controller. Now up here I have artwork from Guybrush Threepwood and Grim Fandango. We have Wii U games, pretty much what you would expect. Mario Kart 8, Mario 3D World. Do have Breath of the Wild. That's how I played through Breath of the Wild, was on Wii U. PS3, I did have a PS3 a few years after it was released. Burnout Paradise, Demon's Souls, great games. Ni no Kuni, another really good one. The Last of Us, 3D Dot Game Heroes. I think most people know about this game nowadays, but it's a Zelda-like action-adventure with a very cool art style. I really love that game. And my Switch games, not a huge collection here. Super Mario 3D World, Mario Odyssey, and Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which is great because it has Super Mario 64, one of the best games ever. Here I have some headphones for PC, and my Switch itself is docked right there. The PC, right here, I have an ultra-wide, 34-inch ultra-wide. It's really great, especially editing videos. Basically, it's like you have 2 monitors. I mean, you can never have enough screen space when you're working on a computer. Microphone, I have a better, newer microphone than this Rode USB Mini, I believe is what it's called. NT USB Mini. But I haven't really messed with the new mic yet. I have some Shure, I don't know. But this one gets the job done, and I'm used to using it, so. Speakers, I think these are Audio Engine, A2s or A4s or something, but they also have a subwoofer hooked up, so I really like the sound quality. And I recently put this little power thing in back here, just drilled a hole, and it came in really useful for if I'm working on projects and I need a quick accessible plug or to charge stuff, really quickly. So that's been a great little project. Up here I do have some artwork that I got from Etsy. Portal, just what an amazing game Portal is. And there is some more artwork over here. More of the data disc vinyl artwork. So moving down here, we have an audio interface for hooking up guitar directly to the computer or microphones. And behind that little black box back here, that is a capture device, video capture, so anything, all my consoles or anything runs through that, so I can capture to the PC. This little box right here is a hard drive connected to my router. I have ROMs on there, so I essentially have my entire collection on that, and I have a PC set up in my living room and right here on this computer, so I just always have access to all of them. And I use Launchbox as a front end, and it works really well. Here's my PS3. Unfortunately, it's not the backwards compatible, the PS2 backwards compatible. It's the one right after that. And my Xbox One S, I think. I don't know. I haven't fired that thing up, and I got it to play the baseball, the show. And I played it for about a month, and it's been setting. And then on top is a HDMI switcher and my PC. I'm due for an upgrade on the PC department, especially now that I'm trying to maybe do 4K videos, and I've had that PC since about 2016 or 17, so this will probably be the year of a PC upgrade. All right, well, that's about everything, I think. I want to thank everybody for watching. Now, I did recently bought these things at just Walmart. Lets me put all my cables, some extra game stuff in there, controllers. So that's really helped my organization quite a bit. Keep everything out of view. But I want to thank everybody for watching. If you're into the PlayStation 1, I've got a lot of PS1 videos on my channel already. I'll eventually be moving on and also covering some Saturn stuff, Sega CD, Dreamcast, just, things from my collection. But I want to thank everybody for watching, and I'll see you next time.